Have you ever stopped to think that sometimes the biggest monster we face is not supernatural but comes from within? Max Mayfield is living proof of this. She survived horrors that most of us cannot even imagine, but her true challenge was not monsters, but fear, guilt, and the pain she carried from home. What would you do if you had to fight your own mind and still try to live life normally? Seems impossible, right? In today's video, we are going to dive deep into Max's psychology. We will discover how family traumas, the loss of those she loved, and the fear of connecting affected every decision she made, and along the way, see how these lessons can apply to our real lives. You will realize that behind the rebellious girl with a skateboard, there is a story of survival, courage, and transformation that goes far beyond fiction. Get ready to understand not only who Max Mayfield is, but also what makes her one of the most complex and human characters in Stranger Things. And the most intriguing part is we will discover that what scares her the most is exactly what could save her. And maybe, as you watch, you will realize that part of this story is also about you. If you are a fan of cinema, psychology, and want to understand the mind behind your favorite character, subscribe to the channel now so you do not miss any video. But first, comment below which character you want me to analyze on the channel. Now, let's go to the video. Max Mayfield arrives in Stranger Things as that new girl who seems to have stepped out of an 80s music video. Rebellious red hair, a skateboard under her arm, and an energy of, "I do not care." But behind the sarcasm and the suspicious look, there is someone desperately trying to find a place in the world. Max is the kind of person who prefers to keep a certain distance because, let's be honest, trusting others is complicated when life has already taught you that the people who should protect you are exactly the ones who hurt you the most. She comes from a dysfunctional family with a violent stepfather and a brother who seems like a storm about to explode. In the middle of this chaos, Max learned to survive through irony, silence, and resistance. You know that type of person who makes a joke at the worst possible moment just to mask what they really feel? Well, she is exactly like that. It is the perfect defense. Nobody hits you if you do not let anyone get close. When Max appears for the first time, you can feel that she is not just a rebellious teenager, she carries the energy of someone who has seen more than they should have. Her gaze always seems a little distant, as if she is calculating the risk of getting attached to someone. And this is the most curious part. The audience quickly realizes that she is not afraid of supernatural monsters. The real fear is inside her, disguised in layers of sarcasm and self-sufficiency. And it is interesting how, even being a girl who tries to appear invincible, Max shows enormous sensitivity. She observes everything, understands everything, but rarely says what she feels. She is the type of person who listens more than she talks, but when she speaks, she always hits the mark. This combination of toughness and vulnerability is what makes her one of the most human characters in the entire series. Her relationship with the group, especially with Eleven and Lucas, reveals the contrast between the need for connection and the fear of getting hurt again. She wants to get closer, but there is always an invisible barrier, as if a part of her says, "Be careful, do not trust too much." And deep down, who has not felt that? That impulse to protect yourself even from good things. Max is a character who grows in silence, in small reactions, in glances, and this is her beauty. Everything she feels, she keeps. But keeping too much comes at a price, and gradually the audience notices how this shield starts to weigh, because the more she tries to be strong, the more the pain finds a way to seep through the cracks. And what is fascinating is that Max does not want to be the victim of her own story. She hates that role. She wants to have control, to be the girl who faces everything with her head held high. But the real world and the upside-down world do not work that way. Sometimes the strength we think we have is not enough to hold everything, and that is when the real conflict begins to appear. It is at this point that her emotional journey begins to intensify. Because despite all appearances of independence, Max is fighting against something much deeper. And this something will start to reveal itself as the pain she avoids so much takes shape. And this pain has a name, a face, and memories she would rather forget. But before diving into this abyss, it is worth understanding where these ghosts come from. What, after all, made Max carry so much guilt and fear inside herself? The relationship between Max and Billy is an open wound, one of those we try to hide, but it bleeds with every memory. Billy was the older brother but was never the hero of the house. In fact, he was the opposite. He carried so much anger inside that he ended up pouring it on those closest to him, and unfortunately, Max was one of them. That is why her fear was not born from the supernatural. It was born at home. And those who grow up in fear learn early to protect themselves even from the people they love. Behind Billy's aggressiveness, there was a boy destroyed by an abusive father. And the cruelest part is that Max knew this. She understood that her brother was also a victim, but that did not make it easier to forgive him. This duality, loving someone who hurts you, is one of the most confusing pains a person can carry. It is as if the heart and reason fight all the time, and neither can win. After Billy's death, Max finds herself sinking into a sea of guilt. It is a type of silent guilt, one that does not scream, but corrodes. She wonders if she could have done something differently, if she should have tried to save him, or if deep down she felt relief when he died. And that is the heaviest part, admitting that someone who caused you pain could also leave a void. It is the kind of conflict we cannot put into words, and that is why Max chooses silence. Her mourning is not only for the loss of her brother, but for the loss of the possibility of reconciliation. She wanted, perhaps unconsciously, for there to be a different ending, an apology, a hug, anything that would give meaning to that broken relationship. But there was none. And when there is no emotional closure, the pain remains trapped. It becomes a ghost that follows us wherever we go, and the Vecna well just took advantage of what was already inside. The arrival of the Vecna is almost symbolic. He does not invade only Max's mind. He invades the space of memories she tried to bury. It is as if he represents the weight of trauma, demanding what she always avoided confronting. And that is why the scenes of her levitating to the sound of running up that hill are so powerful. It is not just a physical escape. It is a metaphor for a mind trying to flee its own shadows. Beyond guilt, Max faces another ghost, the fear of being loved. It seems contradictory, right? But when someone is hurt so many times, they begin to believe that love is dangerous. That if they let someone in, they will get hurt again. And that is why, even with Lucas showing affection, she pulls away. Not because she does not feel anything, but because feeling is what hurts the most. Max also has enormous difficulty asking for help, and this is more common than it seems. Many people grow up believing that vulnerability is weakness, and she is the portrait of this. Instead of crying, she isolates herself. Instead of venting, she pretends everything is fine. But this everything is fine is a heavy mask that cracks little by little, and when the mask falls, that is when the real chaos appears. And deep down, Max's greatest conflict is not with the past or with the Vecna, it is with herself. It is the fear of facing the mirror and seeing someone who could not save anyone, neither her brother nor herself. But perhaps the greatest turning point in her story is precisely discovering that it is not about saving others. It is about allowing herself to be saved. The relationship with Billy and the emotional impact of it, the relationship between Max and Billy is the perfect portrait of wounded love. They grew up together but were never really together. Billy was the hurricane that devastated everything around him, and Max was the shelter trying to resist. But nobody survives a constant storm unscathed. Every scream, every aggressive look left invisible marks, the kind you do not see but feel even when the environment is silent. Billy was not just a violent brother. He was also the product of a broken home. His anger was inherited, passed from father to son, like a poison that nobody taught how to heal. And Max, watching everything, grew up learning the wrong lesson, that love comes with pain, that affection and aggression walk side by side. It is the kind of emotional confusion that many people carry without realizing it, and it shapes the way we relate later on. The most curious thing is that behind the fear, there was a strange kind of empathy. Max saw in Billy a reflection of what she herself could become if she let hatred take over. That is why her disdain for him was also a fear of herself. It is like when we reject something in others because, deep down, we recognize it within ourselves. Billy was the mirror Max did not want to face, and that is why his loss hurt so much. After Billy dies, the emptiness that remains is not only from the physical absence, but from the lack of closure. She did not have time to say what she felt, to forgive, or even to scream everything she had kept inside. And this kind of pain is treacherous because it has no period. It keeps spinning, coming back as a dream, a memory, guilt. And every time she remembers him, a part of her becomes that little girl who could not change anything. Psychologically, this is called a traumatic bond. It is when the brain mixes affection and suffering in such an intense way that separating one from the other seems impossible, and Max experiences exactly this. Even after all the anger, she misses Billy, not because he was a good brother, but because, strange as it seems, he was her brother. And sometimes, the heart does not understand what the mind has already accepted. Billy's death was the trigger that made Max freeze inside. She begins to punish herself for things that were far beyond her control, and this is the point where trauma starts to dominate the narrative of her life. What was once fear becomes guilt. What was guilt becomes self-defense. And what was self-defense becomes isolation. A cycle so silent that, when she realizes it, she is already living more inside her head than in the real world. This dynamic is common in those who grew up with abusive bonds. Love becomes a minefield, full of good memories mixed with pain, and when someone tries to get close, the body reacts with alertness, even if the mind wants to trust. That is why Max takes so long to open up to Lucas. She is not running from him, she is running from what love represents, the possibility of being hurt again. And perhaps the most tragic part is this: Max does not blame only Billy for what he was. She blames herself for not being able to fix him. And this is one of the cruelest illusions that a family trauma can leave, because deep down nobody is responsible for healing the pain of others. But understanding this takes time. And while she tries to discover that time, a new type of pain begins to approach, much darker than anything she has ever faced. The mourning and guilt over Billy's death was not just a loss, it was a wound that never healed. Max did not just watch her brother die, she saw him die trying to do something good for the first time, and this messed everything up inside her. How do you deal with the fact that the person who hurt you the most also sacrificed themselves for you? It is the kind of paradox the brain cannot process, so it does what it can. It freezes. Max's mourning is not made of tears. It is made of silence. She does not collapse, she disappears. That sparkle in her eyes, the spark of someone who lived in motion, suddenly vanishes, and this kind of mourning is dangerous because it seems calm, but it is corroding everything inside. It is the kind of pain that does not scream, but weighs. It is waking up every day with a guilt you cannot explain, just feel. And the worst part is that she genuinely believes she could have prevented it, that if she had done something differently, Billy would still be there. This thought is what keeps the trauma alive. It is like a mental loop, repeating, "It is your fault," and no matter how irrational it is, the traumatized brain believes it. The mind looks for meaning even in the absurd, and when it cannot find it, it invents one, even if that meaning is cruel. The result of this is distancing. Max begins to avoid people, to hide behind an invisible wall. She does not want anyone to see her weak, nor does she want to feel sorry for herself. So she does what many people do when they are hurt. She pretends everything is fine. She smiles when asked, changes the subject, avoids eye contact. Because facing another person is, in a way, facing your own pain. There is a moment in the series that perfectly symbolizes this blockage. When she writes letters to her friends and to Billy, it is an attempt to let out what she cannot say out loud. This is something that, in fact, many people do in real life without realizing it, keeping unspoken feelings as if they were emotional debts. And writing is sometimes the only way to pay a little of them. The interesting thing is that Max is not just dealing with the loss of her brother, she is dealing with the loss of herself. After his death, she begins to not recognize who she is. The skateboard, the music, the friends, everything loses color. And this is something that happens when trauma occupies too much space. It erases the rest. The person survives but does not live. She walks, talks, breathes, but inside she is on autopilot. And the Vecna appears precisely at this point of vulnerability. He does not create the suffering, he amplifies it. He only touches the wounds that were already open. And what he finds inside Max's mind is exactly that. Endless mourning, guilt that became a companion, and a heart that already gave up trying to heal. The monster did not need to hunt her, she was already lost inside herself. But the curious thing is that even with all this pain, there is something in Max that resists, an almost silent strength that manifests when she faces the Vecna for the first time. It is as if, for a moment, she remembered that there is still life inside her, that perhaps the way out of the hole is not to run from what she feels, but to go through it all and discover who she is without carrying the burden of saving everyone. The fear of emotionally connecting with others. Max is the type of person who builds walls so high that sometimes she does not even know how to tear them down. And the most curious thing is that these walls were not built out of pride, they were built out of pain. After everything she lived through, she learned that connecting with someone is opening space to be hurt. So when Lucas tries to get close, she retreats, not because she does not feel anything, but because she feels too much. She has that kind of fear that cannot really be explained. You know, it is the fear of getting attached and losing, of loving and being abandoned, of trusting and being disappointed. It is a fear born from trauma, but disguised as indifference. And this confuses outsiders. It seems cold, but it is self-protection. It is like touching a scar. It seems healed, but it still hurts. With 11, the conflict is different, but it comes from the same place. Max admires her strength, but also finds it difficult to open up. It is as if she thinks, she went through so much worse than me, who am I to complain? This kind of comparison is common in traumatized people. They minimize their own pain because they think they do not have the right to feel it, and this makes suffering grow in silence until it becomes an emotional prison. The friendship between them is beautiful precisely because of this. It is built on vulnerability. Neither of them is good at talking about what they feel, but somehow they understand each other, and this silent connection is powerful. It is like when you find someone who does not need explanations to understand what you are going through. Only Max is still afraid of leaning too much because support, for her, has always been unstable. With Lucas, things are even more delicate. He is her opposite, emotional, expressive, hopeful. And for someone who lives on the defensive, that is almost frightening. Loving someone kind can be as challenging as facing a monster, because kindness requires trust, and trust is what Max fears the most. She wants to be close, but does not know how, and this not knowing puts her in a constant state of escape. It is interesting to think about how this fear shapes her behavior. Max becomes that friend who is always present but never really shows herself. She cares about others but rarely lets them care about her. And this kind of pattern is exhausting because deep down, the person wants to be seen but is terrified of being noticed too much. It is an emotional paradox that both traps and protects. The fear of connecting is also the fear of reconnecting with herself. Because to truly open up, Max would need to revisit inner places she has been avoiding for a long time. And nobody wants to go back to where it hurts, right? But life, in one way or another, always finds a way to put us face to face with what we try to hide. And for her, this confrontation comes in a supernatural form, with the Vecna poking exactly at these wounds. But the most fascinating thing is to realize that behind all this resistance, Max still wants to love. She wants to trust. She wants to feel joy again without fear of losing it. And perhaps that is her true challenge, relearning to connect without having to protect herself all the time. Because sometimes what hurts the most is not being hurt, it is spending a lifetime without allowing someone to truly touch you. Max's traumas are not just scars from the past. They have become the map of how she navigates the present. Every choice she makes, every silence, every distant look. Everything carries a piece of what she has lived. She learned to observe before acting, to test the ground before trusting. It is not coldness, it is survival. And the curious thing is that, to someone looking from the outside, she seems merely introspective, but inside, there is a constant whirlwind trying to maintain control. This need for control is, in fact, a reflection of the lack of it in childhood. When you grow up in an environment where everything is unpredictable, when love becomes a time bomb, the brain tries to compensate. Max tries to control what she feels, what she says, even what she lets people see, because losing control means reliving the feeling of vulnerability. And for someone who has already been hurt, this is the greatest fear of all. This extreme self-control is what makes her such a complex character. She is tough when necessary, but not because she wants to, because she is afraid of collapsing. She is the kind of person who tries to be the rock in the middle of the storm, even if she is breaking inside. Who has never done that, right? Sometimes we wear the role of strong to avoid explaining our weaknesses, and Max masters this art like no one else, but the price of this is high. She lives in constant alert as if ready for a new blow. This posture makes her incredible in dangerous situations. Courageous, agile, focused, but emotionally distant when it comes to people. It is as if she knows how to fight monsters, but does not know how to handle hugs. And this contrast between strength and fragility is what makes Max so fascinating and real. Traumas also shape how she sees the world. She does not easily believe in happy endings, and this affects even her relationship with hope. Max finds it difficult to believe that something good can last because, in her experience, nothing lasted. That is why, even when life starts to improve, she keeps a foot back. It is the mechanism of the traumatized mind. Expecting the worst is the safest way not to be disappointed. Still, her pain is also what drives her, because deep down, Max has a courage that comes from suffering. She knows what it is to lose, so she does not fear risk. She is the kind of person who faces danger not because she is fearless, but because she has felt pains worse than death. This makes her someone of rare strength, a strength that does not shout, but endures. And enduring for her is a form of self-love. This combination of toughness and sensitivity guides her decisions in critical moments. When she faces the Vecna, what saves her is not the absence of fear, but the ability to feel despite it. It is the strength of someone who chooses not to let trauma define the end of their story. And this is an important point. Max does not want to erase the past. She wants to learn to live with it. And that is a form of healing. And the most beautiful thing is that, in the midst of this chaos, she begins little by little to allow people to come close again. It is not easy, it is not fast, but it is real. Every step she takes toward vulnerability is a small victory, because, deep down, what traumas try to steal the most is precisely this: the ability to believe it is still worth opening up, even after everything. Few scenes in television history have captured the power of the human mind, like Max running from the Vecna to the sound of running up that hill. That is not just a beautiful visual sequence, it is a scream of survival. It is the moment when trauma tries to swallow the person completely, and she, even without strength, chooses to run, and running there is not fleeing. It is fighting. It is saying, "I am still here." Kate Bush's song acts as an emotional anchor. It is the thread that connects Max to reality, to love, to good memories, everything that trauma tries to erase. And that is beautiful because it is exactly what happens with many people in real life. Sometimes, what keeps us standing is not strength. It is a sound, a memory, a simple gesture that reminds us who we are. It is proof that the mind, even wounded, always seeks a way back to itself. Her running in that distorted world is symbolic. Every step is a choice: give up or keep going. And with every memory that surfaces friends, laughter, affection, she finds a reason not to give in. It is as if, inside the chaos, the mind is reconstructing what trauma destroyed. And that is the true power of that scene. It is not about fleeing the Vecna, it is about fleeing the emptiness he represents. The Vecna, after all, is not just the villain, he is the personification of pain. He whispers the guilt Max tries to silence. He shows the memories she hid. He makes her relive everything she fears. He is her own mind projecting trauma in the form of a monster. And the fight against him is, at its core, an internal struggle. The battle between giving in to guilt or choosing to live despite it. The lyrics of the song, "And if I only could, I would make a deal with God," carry poetic irony. Max would do anything to switch places with her brother, to fix the past, to ease the pain. But there is no deal with the past. What exists is the present, and in it, the chance to start over. And that is what she does in that moment. Without realizing it, Max is making a deal with herself, promising she will keep running, even with the weight of pain on her shoulders. This scene became iconic precisely because it viscerally translates what a trauma attack is. The feeling of suffocation, the paralyzed body, the mind trapped in memories that seem more real than the now. And at the same time, it shows the way out: connection. The friends calling her name, the voices reminding her she is not alone. It is love, not romantic love, but human love that pulls her back. Psychologically, it is the moment when Max crosses the pain and finds meaning on the other side. It is not that the trauma disappears, it never disappears completely, but she gains new references to balance it. It is when the mind understands that it can feel fear and still keep moving forward. And that is what makes that scene one of the most powerful representations of the internal struggle between pain and the will to live. And, in a way, this is the point at which Max is reborn, not the kind of magical rebirth that erases everything, but the real one, the one of acceptance. The moment she understands that she no longer needs to run from something, but toward something, and with every step, with every note of the song, she reconnects with life, with people, and with herself. It is the beginning of a new version of Max, lighter, more human, and above all, more alive. Max's transformation and what she represents within the narrative of Stranger Things after facing the Vecna and almost dying, Max is no longer the same, and that is exactly the point. Stranger Things has always been a story about growing up amid chaos, and Max represents the most human side of that process. She is the mirror of a generation that learned too early what pain, guilt, and loss are, and her transformation is not about becoming a hero. It is about relearning to live with the weight of what happened. The series shows that the real monster was never just the Vecna, the Demogorgon, or the Upside Down. The true enemy is what they symbolize: trauma, isolation, the fear of feeling, and Max embodies this like no one else. She is the link between the physical and emotional world of the story, proving that sometimes the things that haunt us the most are within us, and the things that save us the most are too. Her transformation is silent but profound. Max goes from an impulsive, rebellious, closed-off girl to someone who understands vulnerability as strength. When she allows her friends to get close, when Lucas' love reaches what she had hidden, it is a sign that she is healing. Not healed, healing. Because the process of healing is not a destination, it is a path walked every day. In the universe of the series, each character represents a type of confrontation with fear. Eleven confronts it with power, Will with sensitivity, Dustin with intelligence, and Max with emotional courage. Her strength does not come from powers, but from the ability to face trauma without looking away. And that is what makes her one of the most human and necessary characters of the entire narrative. Her relationship with Lucas becomes a symbol of this reconstruction. He represents the bond with reality, care, patience, everything that trauma tries to erase. When he holds Max in his arms, crying, while she is unconscious, it is as if the series is saying, love does not defeat evil magically, but it is what prevents evil from consuming us completely. It is what keeps hope alive. And there is something poetic in how Stranger Things chooses to leave her between life and death in a suspended state. It is as if the entire universe stops to acknowledge her struggle. Max becomes a symbol of what happens when pain is too great, but also of what is possible when the will to live persists, even just a little. She is the weak, but still beating heart of the entire series. Narratively, Max is proof that Stranger Things grew along with its audience. Fear ceased to be about external monsters and became about internal shadows. The series evolves with her, from the innocence of the first seasons to the emotional brutality of the fourth. It is a metaphor for growing up, losing, and trying not to lose yourself completely in the process. In the end, Max's transformation is what gives meaning to everything. She represents the rebirth of consciousness, the reminder that even after the worst, there is still something in us that wants to live. And perhaps this is Stranger Things' most powerful message. Horror is inevitable, but humanity is indestructible. And Max Mayfield is living proof, or almost living proof, of that. Max's relationship with death and existential emptiness. Max faces death as a constant shadow, not just from the Vecna or the Upside Down, but from her own past. She knows what it is to lose someone she loves and carries the memory of Billy like a ghost that never leaves. Every decision she makes seems to measure the risk of giving herself or preserving herself, as if death could appear at any moment. It is a kind of awareness that paralyzes and protects at the same time. Trauma makes her live in constant alert, but it also creates a kind of familiarity with emptiness. It is as if she has touched the abyss and, therefore, understands how real it is. But instead of drowning in it, Max learns to walk along the edge. It is a delicate balance between fear and courage, a subtle dance that defines many of her choices, including how she relates to friends and love. The near-death experience in the Upside Down intensifies this relationship with emptiness. She realizes that life is fragile, that everything can end in an instant, and that external monsters are less dangerous than internal ones. That is where her awareness changes. Death ceases to be merely a threat and becomes a reminder that every moment is precious, and this perception shapes the emotional strength she demonstrates afterward. On the other hand, this encounter with death also brings existential solitude. Max feels that no one, besides herself, can truly understand what she has lived, and this reinforces the fear of connecting, exposing herself, allowing herself joy without fear of loss. It is the paradox of survival. Living fully requires courage, but living traumatized requires caution. Max carries both at the same time, silently, and it is curious how she transforms this experience into personal power. Trauma does not paralyze her completely. It makes her sensitive and, at the same time, resilient. She learns to calculate risks, choose allies, and value moments of lightness. Death becomes a catalyst to understand life, to give meaning to small victories, like a hug, a skateboard in the park, or laughing with friends without fear that everything will end. Her perception of death also connects her with deep empathy. Max understands the pain of others because she has already felt the emptiness herself. This makes her closer to 11, to Lucas, and to the group as a whole. She is the bridge between physical survival and emotional survival, reminding us that feeling pain is human. But resisting hopelessness is a choice, and it is this choice that makes her memorable. But it is not just reflection, it is action. Max faces the Vecna not only for herself, but for everyone she loves. Every step in the fight is an affirmation. I exist, and my life matters. It is the awareness of mortality that makes her fight with such intensity, and it is this complex relationship with death that sets her apart. She does not simply fear dying, she fears failing to live fully because of what came before. And, deep down, what Max shows us is that death is not only the end, it is the mirror of life itself. The existential emptiness she feels is, in fact, the awareness of what it means to be alive. And every time she overcomes fear, every time she allows herself to feel love or laugh, she reminds us that existing is more than breathing. It is facing the abyss without losing your essence. So, what do you think of Max Mayfield's journey? Did you feel how her traumas shaped every choice and every relationship? I want to know in the comments, which character do you want me to analyze in the next video and why? Let's create together a list of characters who deserve this deep psychological dive. If you connected with her story, remember, understanding the traumas of others is also a way to understand our own. And just as Max learned to deal with guilt and fear, we can all find ways to face our own internal monsters. Every step counts and every reflection makes a difference. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to not miss any content. Here, you will continue exploring characters, their stories, and the psychological dilemmas they face, and maybe discover new things about yourself along the way. The journey does not end here, and I want you to be with me every step of the way.